Welcome to Season 2 of the Fearless Lady Podcast. I am your host, Charlene Light, and this season, I'm taking you on the greatest adventure of my life. I'm moving to Paris. I am a fearless coach and a soul guide here to inspire you as I navigate all things spiritual in the greatest city in the world, Paris. After spending a year tackling my fears at 40, I learned that everything that we truly desire and who we came to be is on the other side of our fear. Life gets to be as fun and miraculous as you dream it to be. So what are you waiting for? Let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Fearless Lady Podcast. Happy New Year. Happy 2025. I am currently in Paris. I was in London for 3 weeks over the holidays, cat sitting, of course, 2 wonderful, wonderful cats. And I really, really loved it. I was staying in an area that I had never been before. By the way, London is enormous. It was just way bigger than I remembered. I was staying in this area called Highgate, which is in the northern part of London, in a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment. So I had plenty of space. I got to see the fireworks from the balcony of this apartment. I loved hanging around that neighborhood. I loved being away from the center of London so I can really experience just so much more of the greenery. I don't think I remembered London as being so green, but it really was so beautiful. I felt like I was walking around in a forest. There was this huge park called Hampstead Heath, which I often walked through, which was absolutely beautiful. And and it was so interesting because I didn't know where I was going to go after that. Again, this whole surrender experiment with life, I was just allowing life to kind of show me or yielding to me where I was going to land next. I definitely wanted to come back to Paris, but I didn't know, I could stay in London a little bit longer. I didn't know. So one morning, maybe a week into my visit, I happened to open up Facebook and there was a post and it said, I'm looking for a cat sitter from January 2nd to the 18th in Paris, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, perfect. So I responded. We right away got on a video call and then voila, here I am. I'm back in Paris. And this has sort of been, the beautiful, wonderful aspect of really developing this trust muscle with life, that things are just really kind of, I feel very much in flow, very grateful. Before I went to London, I actually made sort of a unexpected trip back home to LA. And I was there for about 3 weeks. So it was just a beautiful kind of last, 6-7 weeks of feeling in flow. And of course, a bunch of stuff came up, going home. But at the same time, it was a beautiful, much needed visit. But for this episode, I really want to talk about the power of trust, the power of saying yes when everything in our being really wants to contract and say no. And I find that in our mainstream culture, there's this tendency to say things like, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. And if it doesn't feel right, then you say no. All of these sort of terms around, the power is really in our no. And I'm actually going to flip that and say the power is in our yes. Because when you start to trust life, which is essentially what I'm doing, I'm literally saying, I'm letting go of the ego's needs and desires. And I'm saying, life and the universe and my higher self is guiding me and knows already all of the things that I truly desire. I don't have to keep repeating it, right? And so I'm allowing life to kind of yield to me the next steps rather than sort of controlling and putting out my lists and all of this stuff. Now, this comes from, years and years and years of doing it the other way. Right? I spent years creating lists and, vision boards and all of those things. And so I'm not trying to say that it doesn't have its place. But for me, in this phase of my life, I am way, way, way more comfortable and feel so relaxed and calm when I just trust life. I want to read a quote. And then I also want to give you some examples of when I do just trust life, despite what my ego might want, miracles occur. It happens all the time. But I want to say something because I'm talking to you, or I'm recording this actually as of January 11th. And as I'm talking to you, the entirety of Los Angeles is on fire. It is so wild and surreal to me that this is happening because, again, I'm looking at it from the lens of this being a mirror. And what I'm feeling is, and I've even said this many times as a metaphor, it feels like I've been sort of letting my whole old life just burn, right? Just let it all burn. My whole way of being, the way I showed up in the world, just let it burn, let it go, And here I'm experiencing and witnessing my hometown where I grew up, my old life essentially burning up. It's so surreal. Now, my family, my friends, everybody's okay. They had to evacuate, but they're doing okay. That's the most important thing. And of course, I am deeply empathetic to what everybody is going through. At the same time, I technically right now don't have a home. What I've been cultivating is that home is within. That my home is within. I have been bouncing around for the past 7 months, and I've been able to show up in these, beautiful places where I'm taking care of people's cats or animals, and I'm able to feel at home. And that's also such a profound gift out of all of this. And also the idea that at any moment, it's like we think we're safe because we have a house, we have money in our accounts, we have this, we have all these things, all these external things that, give us the safety. And my whole journey is about developing and cultivating that the only thing that's real is what's within. So to detach from all of those things giving you that and to cultivate it within. Cultivate the abundance that you know that you're already abundant within, no matter what your bank account says. Cultivate that you're safe, no matter whether you have a home or not. It is a within existence. And yeah, so it's just so crazy to me. And obviously, if you're listening to this and you've been affected, my heart goes out to you. I understand this was not their choice. This happened unexpectedly. So I get the difference, right? This was my choice. However, I also had to go through a tremendous kind of grieving process because I was gripping so hard. I didn't want to let go. I didn't want my biggest fear, which was, giving up the apartment, being homeless, being broke, all of those things, like I've mentioned before. And so I understand that when something shows up that's so devastating, our survival instinct is to not accept it and to fight and to, try whatever you can because you're just so like, no, this can't be real. So I understand. I totally get it. But at the same time, there's something, and this is sort of what I want this podcast to be about, which is when you can just accept and trust that life actually knows what it's doing. There's a certain serenity and grace and peace that comes over you. And then you're just able to pick up and go, okay, the most important thing is we're safe, we're healthy. Let's start to repair. Let's start to keep going and keep showing up in full acceptance. So I want to read this quote. This was something I actually just realized. I had it on my desktop. I had saved it, and I believe it's from Dr. Joe Dispenza. I had it saved because I wanted to remember when times got hard, why I was doing this, and what I was actually coming up against. So it says, become so familiar with the old personality that says, I'm a victim, or this always happens to me, this never works out for me, maybe I just don't get what I truly want, etc. Then sit in the fire of those emotions, and you have to sit with them and know there's something on the other side of them. This is where most people give up. I need something out there to make this go away. And to change means you're not relying on anything out there. That's the matrix, the hypnosis. That's the conditioning. We want you to become so familiar with that feeling that you catch yourself in your waking day. There's an unlearning process that requires a lot of attention, awareness, and takes energy. The hardest part is not making the same choice, and it's not going to feel good. So I also want to say that I'm going to answer this question that somebody posted around what to do when you are experiencing fear show up, even though you trust, but do you have any exercises to pull you out of that moment of, contrast or fear when it's happening? And so stay tuned. I'm going to answer that question at the end as well. So the first example I want to give you is during the summer when, again, I was just trusting life to yield to me a safe place to land every, couple weeks or however long, I was staying at a friend's house who, very graciously said that I can stay there while she was away. And I didn't know where I was going to go after. So I had about a week or so left, right? And I had just posted for the first time my surrender experiment, which you can listen to if you haven't already. And so somebody had responded who's on my email list. And she said, if you need a place to stay, I actually have a place in Sceaux, which is a little bit outside of Paris. She's like, so, definitely just let me know. So I was like, oh, that's really cool, right? One of the things that I will say is that what was really uncomfortable for me at that point was accepting help without a transaction, meaning I wanted to give something in return. I didn't at that point just learn that I could just say thank you and yes and take somebody's offer and not feel this need or feel this guilt around I have to do something to pay them back, right? Because at that point I did not have the money to pay somebody. So what I would say was usually I can, I'll do a session for you in exchange, right? So anyways, I get on the phone with this girl and she's like telling me about this place. And I said, yeah, if it's okay, where I'm staying ends. And so if I can stay at your place for like a week, that would be amazing. And she's like, oh yeah, sure. No problem. And she's like telling me all the logistics. And then she's like, well, do you have a place afterwards? I'm like, well, not yet, but I'm sure something else will come up. And then she's like, well, I hope you're not going to be a squatter. And I was like, a squatter? What the hell is that? Like, I had no idea what that word was. So I just very innocently, I was like, what's that? She's like, well, that's somebody that just doesn't leave. And I was so offended. I'm like, you offered this to me. Why are you accusing me of something that it was just so preposterous at the moment. I was really, really taken back, right? And then I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous, And I hear in my head, I'm just like, if you only knew how hard it is for me to even accept your offer, it was wild, But nevertheless, I just kind of said, no, I'm not going to do that. I am sure something will come up. And I'm like, you sure you're okay with me staying? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine with it. No problem, So we got off the phone call and I was so triggered. I was angry. I was like, okay, universe, I do not want to stay at this place. No. We're going to work on magic. We're going to try to find something else. I know we can. We still have a week left. Yes. Of course, everything in my body was screaming, do not stay at her place. I was so uncomfortable with this feeling that she kind of, and again, it's my interpretation. I was triggered by what she said because inside of me was this little part which felt like somebody's going to think that I'm taking advantage of them. I can't just accept somebody's goodwill. They're going to think that I'm going to take advantage of them. That was absolutely a belief, right? And I had to go into it because it's not her. It's just the universe mirroring to me this belief system. So instead of trying to figure out where I'm going to stay and find a new place, I sat in that uncomfortable feeling and I actually leaned in. I said, okay, she thinks this. I must think this about myself. I must think that I, in some way, don't deserve somebody's goodwill or whatever. That I'm not enough, that I can't just accept people's help, that I always have to, I just kind of went through this whole process. I was still really, really uncomfortable. And, but at the same time, it's like, I just accepted it. I was like, okay, we're going to lean in and just trust everything's going to be okay, right? So I show up at her place. I open the door and all of a sudden the alarm goes off. The alarm is it is so loud. Literally, I thought I was going to go deaf. It was so loud. I couldn't figure out how to turn this thing off. And I was like, oh my God. So my first instinct was like, oh my God, this was the wrong choice. I shouldn't have stayed here. No, it's the universe telling me I shouldn't have stayed here, right? So I call her on the phone. I could barely hear her. She's like trying to tell me how, and then I guess she can turn it off where she's at, which she was in New York at the time. And so she turns it off and I was like, my whole body was it went through like the worst. She's like, I know how loud that was. I'm going to give you a moment. I'm sorry, I should have probably turned it off before you got there. I'm like, yeah, I couldn't even speak. I was so startled. So I just sat in that and I was like, okay. And the voice in my head was like, leave. Do not stay here. This is not a good place. Like, don't you see all the signs, right? But instead, I said, keep leaning in. Keep leaning in. This is what life has yielded to me. I trust this is here for me. I trust this is here for me, right? So later that evening, I go to sleep. And for whatever reason, the people next door decide to have this big party and it's so loud and there's music and there's, people talking it was like they were on top of my head. Okay. I'm thinking eventually they're going to cool it, right? Because the French really aren't, in my view, especially in Paris, I haven't experienced that they stay out that late. It's like 4 a.m. and it's still going on and it's so incredibly loud. So then I'm just like, oh my God, I get so angry. I literally walk outside in my pajamas and go next door. And it's a bunch of teenagers having, the time of their life. And I don't even care at this point that they're French. I just say, I am trying to sleep. I do one of those, right? I am trying to sleep. It's 4 a.m. Can you turn that music down? I didn't even threaten to call the police because at this point I'm like, I don't even know how to do that in France. But of course, like, oh, sorry. And so eventually they turned it down. But, the voice inside me was like, you see, you should have never stayed here. You see, this was the wrong choice. You see? And I was just like, no, like keep leaning in. I really understood that nothing changes outside of you until you fully accept what is. So all of this was happening, but I understood that there is something within me that the universe wants me to break free of, because I knew that it was limiting me to have this point of view because that's what was happening. So if I can just lean in a little bit more, even though it was so uncomfortable, I knew that there was a breakthrough on the other side. I knew it. So at that point, I don't know, I fell asleep, woke up. I ended up, texting her and saying what happened. She's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. She's like, you could have called the police, that has happened a few times, but she was very, very compassionate. And so that was really helpful, And I said to her, I'm like, because here's the thing, this is a place that she owns and she's been trying to rent it out. And so I had said, well, maybe I can help you with the energy of the place, And so my first instinct was like, this apartment wants no one in it but you. Like clearly it's sending us a message, So we got to clear something here because it doesn't want anyone here. Not at all, And she just kind of laughed. And so this is what's interesting. I did have the inclination. There was another friend, and I say that loosely because I don't know her that well, but she also offered her place in Paris when she travels. And I just was like, well, this is me trying to secure something so that I can alleviate this discomfort of not knowing. Even though I know this is all about leaning into the unknown and trusting that an opportunity comes to me, I still went and asked this person, hey, is it possible to stay in your place for this date? I have a place up until, the end of the week. And then would it be possible to stay at your place? And so she responds, hey, actually, I have somebody else staying. I'm sorry. And this is something that happens quite a bit. There's nothing wrong with asking, but what I've learned is it's always coming from fear. So whenever something's coming from fear, I instantly know, because it's usually the universe is like, babe, like that's not going to work. Like, you asked to trust completely. So that means you've got to lean into the unknown, and you've got to trust that an opportunity will show up. You just have to. I know it's frustrating, but that's what you asked for. And I was like, exactly. So when she told me that, I was like, oh, right. Okay. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong. It's not about making anything wrong. It's just about sometimes you have to do that, right? So the other interesting thing was, I was like, well, hey, I was telling this girl whose place I'm staying at, I'm like, hey, I would love to, maybe we can do a session and just kind of work through some stuff that you're feeling around opening up your space and maybe why it hasn't been rented yet. And so she's like, yeah, great. So we get on the call, and I did have this feeling like, I wonder, should I bring up that I was a little offended? I was like, no, like that's my stuff, So I didn't bring any of that up. And I just really had this really open heart, and I felt very vulnerable. I felt very vulnerable and open and raw with her. And I feel like we both showed up in that way. And so what happened during the session, I don't know. It was just such a beautiful shift. Like, I was able to help her, and there was some real stuff that, we kind of worked through together. But I think what really happened was this just deeper connection where she said, I am really happy that you're there. And it's funny how you don't realize you need to hear something until it shows up, right? And when she said that, like, I could have cried, because I just felt, and it had nothing to do with her. I think if I really want to go back, I can tell you many, many stories of staying, at my father's as a child and feeling like I didn't want to be there because I didn't feel like I was wanted, and all of these things. And so that's why I had so much resistance around, if somebody really doesn't want me there, I feel super uncomfortable, or I need to give something in return to earn my stay, sort of speak. It was all based on stuff from my childhood, and that's what was being kicked up, and that's what I needed to move through. And that's why this experience was so profound and so needed. And then that evening, the day before, or actually what I remember was, I just want to stay in a place that's like for like at least a month. Like, I want to just be able to relax into a place for like a month. I wish something like that would come up. But then I let it go, that thought go. And then all of a sudden I get a ding on my phone, and it was a message from somebody on Rover, basically saying, hi, I'm in this desperate situation. I have this cat. I'm going to be going away. I don't know for how long. Would you be interested, in Paris? And it's paid. And I was like, wow. And it's for the exact date that the week would end. So it was like perfect timing. I mean, literally perfect timing. So I respond, I'm like, yeah, I'm available. Yeah, I can totally do it. So we agreed to meet up. That's when, of course, I met up with the love of my life, or, the cat that really changed it all for me, Wendy. And of course her owner, who I met. And, and that's what started the cat sit that I ended up staying in for almost 2.5 months. And Wendy really opened me up. Like, I just fell madly in love with her. And it was for all the reasons that I didn't want, which is like, she was super needy and she was constantly like on me, but I just kept leaning in until I finally broke open and was like, oh my God, like, you're here to teach me how to stay open, and to teach me where I just was so used to closing off. Anybody that came in that wasn't comfortable for me, or was pushing me to get out of my usual kind of like, I guess, hyper independent state, I was so threatened by. But because I'm in this new state of just leaning in, saying, yes, this is here for me, it totally opened me up. And then I just fell madly in love. And really, when I left, I was really bawling my eyes out and just thanking Wendy, like, thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for showing me. And I can cry where I just had so many walls up, Yes, it was incredibly moving. And the other thing that happened in that week of me being uncomfortable was I got the guy that booked a soul reading for me, then said, I want to do coaching with you, and ended up paying for the 3 months. And I was like, wow. And I'll never forget that moment. Like, all of these things just came through because I leaned in, because I was showing up to whatever was appearing in my life, no matter how how hard it was for me. And I was saying yes to it. So I just want to leave you with that. And I know I didn't quite answer the question around what do you do when fear shows up? And I guess I want to leave these examples as evidence of what to do, which is that lean in. It's about building a new relationship with our fear. It's about talking to our fear as our loving child, because it is. It is just our inner child screaming, trying to break free, not wanting to feel uncomfortable. And we have to be that loving parent and reparent ourselves in those situations and say, no, babe, I got you. I got you. I know. And almost, I know you got to talk to it like what you're feeling is valid, right? Because it is. It's scary. And when you have a deep wound and it's being, triggered in the moment, you don't want to hear, oh, let's not feel this. You don't want to hear this is stupid and try to shame yourself for it. You want to feel supported. So support that part of you that is in agony or feeling an ache from the past, and know that this current situation that you're in is there as an invitation to help you heal, it and to restore it back to love. And so that's how I want to end this podcast today. And I want to say thank you so, so much for listening. If any of this resonated, I always love to hear your messages. So please let me know. And I want to wish you all a beautiful, healthy, happy 2025. I plan on doing an episode every single month. I realized last year I only did 4, which is so wild, but it was a wild year. And I really do plan on doing more this year. And then once again, I'm available if you want to do a session or work with me long term. I am sending you all so, so, so much love. Take care, everyone. Au revoir.